As Barry and Julie were asleep upstairs, a fire broke out in the ground floor garage of their home.
Welcome to WatchMojo UK, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 grand designs disasters.
It broke my heart to see so much of the character, the integrity of this place disappear, to be replaced by some pretty hideous features and a rather clunky layout.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we'll be looking at the biggest money pits and failures Kevin MacLeod has introduced to us. Let us know in the comments if you'd ever live in any of these homes. Number 10, Britain's cheapest house. Though a lot of grand designs builds end up failing because the owners are just too ambitious and spend way too much money, that wasn't the case for this low-impact home in Pembrokeshire.
As far as I can tell, Simon and Jasmine are starting to build their family home with just £500 in the bank. That is adventurous.
The goal of the Dales is to build the cheapest and most eco-friendly house in the UK, which will be completely self-sustaining and won't cause any damage to the environment. They also did a lot of the construction work themselves, impressively.
This is going to be medium hobbity.
Medium hobbity.
I think this is a bit more kind of medium to full strength.
But tragedy struck in 2018, only 2 years after the episode aired, when the house was caught in an accidental fire that destroyed the entire structure. They were some of the few people on grand designs we didn't want to see fail. Number 9, Lime Kiln House.
Right.
Something to grow out of the ground that was fitting and appropriate, and that would still be fitting and appropriate in 50 years, 100 years' time.
This build is frequently touted as one of the show's best, and it would have been had Prue and Richard not completely ignored the local authorities' guidance for the house they wanted to build. Specifically, they had to preserve the Victorian lime kilns and create a house that blends in with the surrounding countryside.
However I look at this building, and wherever I look at it from, it doesn't yet slip noiselessly into its beautiful surroundings.
They fail dramatically at the latter, instead building an enormous modernist mansion featuring a lot of right angles and huge walls made of glass. It sticks out like a sore thumb in the rural corner of Midlothian they're living in, and that's why it was a disaster.
I think it works beautifully in its landscape.
Number 8, Contemporary Barn Conversion. Apparently, not a lot of people want to buy derelict former farm buildings in the middle of nowhere to live in. Who would have known?
This is going to be your home.
Yep.
That didn't stop Jane and Robert, however, the latter of whom had grown up in the area and had apparently been eyeing this old barn for years. To add insult to injury, they also spent £250,000 on the barn, which they then needed to spend even more on to do a full conversion.
As this one's ground to a halt because of miscommunication and because of miscalculation. I suppose above all because of Jane and the architect, who sort of miscalculated how much they need to be on top of this project.
The barn is also extremely dark, and they can't get planning permission to add more windows, making it almost completely unsustainable as a home. Jane also decided that instead of keeping the architect on, she was going to manage the whole project herself. Why?
When it came here, I just put my hands over my head, virtually cried. I thought it was absolutely dreadful.
Number 7, Miami Beach House. When you really get down to it, how many differences actually are there between Devon and Florida? Well, a lot, unfortunately for Julie and Mark.
I don't know. This is scary. Mark and I can't relax until this bit's done.
They wanted to build their Miami dream home on the Devon coast in honor of the fact they've been to Miami a few times and quite liked it. Like all good modernist homes, one entire side of the building is made of floor-to-ceiling windows with a sea view. The simple fact is that though a house like this might look great in Miami, it looks downright ridiculous after being transplanted to the Devon coast.
Julie has got her Miami beach house, and they've moved in.
It's also right on the seafront, so is doomed to someday fall into the ocean. Number 6, the Clifftop House.
You know that parable of the wise man who built his house on rock and the foolish man who built his house on sand? Well, this is the story of a man who built his house on a crumbling cliff.
Yet again, we have someone who thought they could defeat nature by building a modernist mansion right on the edge of a cliff, despite this always being a doomed endeavor. And this cliff is worse than many others, since it's already crumbling into pieces and constantly battered by strong winds and waves.
It seems hopeless, but it's all Rob's allowed to do.
Kevin doesn't hold back criticizing their decision to build there either, claiming that the coastline loses 6 inches every year, meaning it's not going to last very long at all. They also say the house will bring architecture to North Wales, which is more than a little patronising to all the people living there already.
This is a jaw-droppingly beautiful home, which could collapse into the sea in less than 60 years because of the fast-eroding cliff.
Number 5. The Curve.
Is the house itself going to be something of a work of art?
Probably all of it.
Some houses are all about the gimmick, and in the case of the Curve, the gimmick was, well, it was curved. Though this sounds simple to anyone not versed in architecture, in actuality, building a curved house like this was extremely difficult and tremendously stressful. The build really took its toll on Barry, the visionary owner behind the idea.
You know, it's worthwhile, and it's going to be a pleasure every time I walk up and down it.
Sadly, Barry not only had a heart attack while working on the house because of sheer stress, but he also had to undergo 5 heart bypasses.
You know, it messed my body and my head, there's no doubt about it. I was, you know, not good for not a lot for quite a number of months.
Even sadder, though the house was eventually completed to a high standard, just a few years later Barry sold up and moved on. He did get almost £3.5 million for his trouble though. Number 4, the Birmingham Church.
How on earth are you going to convert this? What's it going to be?
Of course, Barry, who built the Curve, wasn't the only Grand Design's guest to have a heart attack during filming. The man behind this church conversion had 2. Unfortunately, the church was a bit of an architectural black sheep, even at the beginning, being massive and quite ugly from the outside.
But he's already spent more than half of the family's savings, and there's still so much to do.
However, being a listed building, there were a lot of original features they weren't allowed to change, and Dean also decided not to hire an architect, doing the whole thing himself.
Even when the bricklayers were in, I was the one doing all the labouring for them.
Ultimately, the project took its toll, with Dean and his wife Hilary splitting up, and Dean having to undergo surgery for the many injuries he suffered while building. Number 3, 9-storey water tower.
How tall is it?
It's something like between 8 and 10 stories, so I'm not quite sure.
This 100-foot tower in the heart of London was given a new lease on life in 2012 when a couple decided to buy it and convert it into a living space. They spent millions of pounds building massive extensions to the tower, including what basically amounts to a separate house in its own right, and an enormous lift shaft next door.
Eventually it would collapse, probably another winter.
The entire project has been called cursed by those in the know, and one of the owners actually had to borrow his grandmother's credit card and run up her debts just to finish it.
It's kind of worth it, isn't it?
This is what it's about.
It later went on the market for £6.5 million, but didn't sell until the asking price had been unceremoniously slashed to £2.75 million. Number 2, Medway Eco Barge.
What we want to do here is to create something which is totally self-contained and self-sustainable, even down to the water if we can manage that.
This was another couple who didn't have a lot of money, but they did have a dream. They wanted to build a large houseboat and had already purchased an old barge to convert for a few grand. But it didn't go well from the start.
Well, hopefully it'll improve.
Should we stand around the other
what
side?
I'm giving a bit of license here because I'm assuming that it can't get much worse than this.
They barely planned anything and wanted to use only second-hand building materials, frequently arguing with their own contractors. The builders had no guidance to go on and clearly didn't like working with the couple.
That boat, in many ways, I would say, is a wonder. It's created itself.
They also struggled to find anywhere to moor it, and it was never finished. Years on, the boat was sighted, washed up, and vandalised, having been claimed by squatters. Number 1, the Lighthouse.
This project is all about trying to create something that allows Hazel and Ed to love where they are.
It's officially called Chesil Cliff House, but it's more recognisable as the ghastly, unfinished lighthouse that's been sitting on the North Devon coast for the last decade. The lighthouse was plagued with problems from the beginning, namely the fact it was on a very unstable cliff that needed to be reinforced with concrete to stop it from plunging into the sea.
And you've invested so much money and time and see it like this.
It was also so windy that construction had to stop numerous times. It was an extremely difficult to implement design, and it went about £2 million over budget. The lighthouse led to the breakdown of its owner Edward's marriage, with him and his wife deciding to go their separate ways.
No, we parted company last year. I put her through a horrendous time.
He'll have to immediately sell it upon completion. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo UK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.